This is Boomer Life on CL 650.
Well, gee, it didn't take very long to get the guests in the studio kind of grooving to the music here. About 10 seconds into it, and they're both kind of sliding around the room. Here's a little dirty dancing music there from Jennifer Warnes and Bill Medley. It's Boomer Life here on CL 650. We're talking about retirement living with our friends from Revera Retirement Living, specifically Crofton Manor at 2803 West 41st Avenue, Kerrisdale, west side of Vancouver. Our guests are Irish Webb, who is a lifestyle consultant at Crofton Manor, and Director of Recreation and great colleague Andrew Evers in studio with us as well. I wanted to come back to something because during the break we were talking earlier about the confusion that those of us learning for the first time about retirement living communities and options in order to better inform our parents, the seniors, the confusion is that not all companies use the same descriptive adjectives to describe their communities and what they offer. So we were talking about Crofton Manor, Irish, and you described it as an independent living community. Mm-hmm. But if I'm living at home and I have someone come in 3 times a week to help me with this, that, and the other thing, and I move to Crofton Manor, I can still have that person come to my new home 2 or 3 times a week to help me out with the same things, can't I?
Absolutely. In independent living, we have people who perhaps have had a care aide or someone close to them who has been helping them, either companionship or care. They can come into the independent living side and do that care.
Okay. So now you mentioned something during the break, and this is why I thought we needed to come back to this. You talked about something called supportive living. Exactly. Now this, I'm afraid, is the first time I've heard this term. So what is supportive living, please?
Right. So in supportive living at Crofton Manor, it's if someone requires support in house. So in our supportive living area, that's where we provide the care. So each person would have a personalized care plan through Live Well program.
Mm-hmm. This is part of the assessment process.
That's right, correct. Okay. Yeah. And then their care plan would be taken care of in our supported living community.
So back to you for a second, Andrew, and your 96-year-old grandmother, and gosh, I hope she doesn't mind us talking about her on the public airwaves. But if she were to satisfy your wishes and move to Crofton Manor and take a little more than a little pressure off your dad, what sort of living do you think your grandma would require at 96? And because you were telling us earlier, your dad has to help her with her meds every day, and in your dad's case, he's not a pharmacist, so there's sometimes a little guessing going on. So grandma would appreciate a little more precision, please.
Absolutely.
So what part of the community would she fit into most comfortably?
She'd fit into the supportive living, and I think for a number of different reasons beyond just the medication. I think some of the programs that we offer on the supportive living side are actually meant for people who need a little bit more assistance. And then they also have flexibility there as well, because we have lots of care aides around. We have lots of people who can help them out immediately. So if there's ever an issue, all my staff have phones, and they can just call the nursing station if there's anything going on.
Right.
And so my grandmother would have that opportunity that my dad may not be able to provide, of having that assistance right away.
Exactly. I wonder, based on, you've only been there, both of our guests are in their first year with Revera, but I wonder if you've been there long enough to notice a phenomenon I've heard about in the past. A person, a senior, moves into a retirement community. They're that person who's been living in the same house since 1971. They've been living alone for the last 5 or 6 years, not eating well, generally in fairly fragile health by the time they finally get convinced to move to a retirement community. And they're pretty frail. This Live Well assessment program that you have at Revera would probably take one look at this frail elderly person and go, oh my gosh, we need to really introduce this person into our community gently. I wonder how many of those frail initial visitors or arrivals have benefited, Andrew, from the regular nutrition programs, from the regular recreational programs, and are no longer quite as frail and fragile as they may have been when they first moved in. There's a certain resurgence of energy and health. Are you able to notice that?
So we have this, I mentioned before, we have this program called the Java Music Club.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the things we talk about a lot in that program is how happy the residents are to be living at Crofton. So they talk about how reluctant and how resistant they were about coming in. And then they turn and they say, but I'm so happy to be here. Because while at home I had my husband and my friends, but when my husband passed,
Right.
Like here I was, and I was alone. And now I've come to this Crofton community, and I have all these great friends. I have all these great relationships, and I feel safer, and I feel healthier, and I'm able to walk, and there's all these options and choices for me to do things.
Mm-hmm.
We have a number of residents who just are so happy to be where they're at now.
And it's interesting because Revera, one thing Revera, and I know this for a fact, does relentlessly is survey its residents in every community across Canada. And year after year after year, the finding comes back and it's always consistent. It moves 1 percentage point one way or another, but it's always in the high 90s. 96 or 97% of residents in these communities surveyed say, you know, this is terrific, but if I have one regret or one thing that I could do as a do-over, I would have moved here sooner. Mm-hmm. You know, in many cases, it's left until there's very little, there's not as much room for enjoyment as there might have been.
Mm-hmm. I think that when you look at some of the older adults and some of the parents of the boomers, we look at they look at their mom and their dad and they see their little tiny challenges, but they don't really see what's really going on. And then when they're moved to a community like Crofton, they're just able to step outside of that caregiver role. And
Sure.
Once they step outside that caregiver role, all of a sudden they begin to notice all the little things that we notice all the time because we see them
Sure.
in a different way than their parents, than their kids see them.
Andrew mentioned one thing just a couple of minutes ago, Irish, that I wanted to pick up on, and he was talking about his grandma would, among other things, moved into Crofton Manor, feel safe. Mm-hmm. Safe is a thing that is of paramount importance to us boomers. We worry about mom or dad taking a fall, living by themselves, spending endless hours alone, maybe getting depressed, maybe whatever. But more importantly than anything else, they're not in a safe environment necessarily. And if they take a fall and they're not wearing some kind of alert bracelet or something, it could be traumatic, to say the least. We care deeply that our parents are safe. That's the bottom line for a lot of people who show up at your office, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest things that I hear when we're having conversations with families in my office, and it is about safety. Often it might be concerns about falling and mobility if there's stairs in the home, which
Sure.
often there are, and definitely safety is a concern and one of the reasons.
Right, right. And the safety speaks enormously to peace of mind. If you know that mom or dad is comfortable and safe and, gosh, even happy in a retirement community, imagine how much better you're going to sleep at night. You, the
You
former
said it.
caregiver, right?
Absolutely.
Interesting stuff. Boomer Life with our friends from Revera Retirement Living, and specifically Crofton Manor at 2803 West 41st Avenue on Vancouver's west side. In studio, Irish Webb and Andrew Ebbers on Boomer Life, and we're back with lots more right after this.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CL 650.